Hello Year 6, welcome to Thursday's English lesson in our unit for this week, which is all about persuasive writing in adverts, particularly those adverts with an environmental message to convey. Now, we've already learned about pathos to create an emotional response in the reader or viewer through the use of emotive language, but pathos is created in so many more ways through the use of the literary techniques that you've already worked so hard on in your poetry learning this term. So today, what we'd really like you to do is think back to that learning. Remember the devices you used for poetry and bring all of that together to write persuasively for a new advert of your own choice. But before we get stuck into that, let's just learn about one new poetic device that authors use to create effect when they write. Oxymoron. Now, oxymoron is where two opposite meaning words that contradict each other are used side by side for effect. The actual word oxymoron, where's my pointer? Here it is, comes from the two Greek words, oxy, meaning sharp, sharp as in clever and bright, and moronous, meaning stupid. So you can see here, sharp and stupid, side by side. It is itself a contradiction, that very term, oxymoron. Let's have a look at a few more examples so that you get the idea. Plastic glasses. Now, if something's plastic, it can't be glass, can it? You know what it means. You know that glasses that you use for parties may be plastic, but the very term plastic glasses is an oxymoron because those two words contradict each other. Let's have a look at another. Escaped prisoner. Well, you're either a prisoner or you're escaped. Can't really be both. You know what it means, but they are a contradiction. A deliberate mistake. Well, mistake suggests that it was done completely by accident, so how can it be both? How can it be deliberate as well? I've got several other examples of oxymorons here. A big baby. Alone together. Well, if you're alone, you can't be with other people, so alone together is an oxymoron, two words side by side that contradict each other. A deafening silence. If something's deafening, it suggests it's really, really loud, but silence means there's an absence of noise. Here's another really good example of an oxymoron that people use in everyday speech. Seriously funny. Now, when somebody says something is seriously funny, we know that it means they thought it was really funny. But these two words side by side are an oxymoron because if something is serious, it suggests that the situation was actually quite grave. But if it's funny, then it was a light, bright, funny situation. It can't be both. It can't be serious and fun at the same time. That's what an oxymoron is. A quiet scream. Pretty, ugly. The only, meaning there's one. Choice, meaning there's many. Do you get the idea? This is what oxymorons do. Two words side by side that contradict each other, but authors use them all the time to create effect. So, let's see some examples of oxymorons at work in this next advert that we have for you to look at today. Can you spot the oxymorons here? Now take a minute to look at the image of this advert and then we'll read the text. Now, the idea of the advert is to raise awareness of the consequences of deforestation. The campaign is called "The Forest Never Dies Alone." So let's read the text together and see, as we read it, can you spot any oxymorons in the description, two contradicting words used side by side? Now, if you've printed out this page with the text which is on the Google Drive, you can highlight any oxymorons that you spot as we read. But as always, if you don't want to print it out or you can't, then get your notepaper ready, because you can just note down any that you see. Let's read the text and see if we can spot those oxymorons being used for effect. Here's the text here. Every day the forests break with the dull roar of engines. Is this really progress or the final push that will bring the jaguar to the brink of extinction? New roads and houses are a bitter-sweet consolation for the destruction of this creature's habitat. This is no peaceful conquest. The loud whisper of machines bring devastation in their wake. Now is the time to act. It is our only choice. Remember, the forest never dies alone. Take a few moments now to pause on this part of the video and look back at the text. Can you spot the oxymorons being used here? Now you've had a few moments to do that, I'm going to go back through with a highlighter and see if I can spot the oxymorons and if they're the same as yours. So every day the forests break with the dull roar of engines. Dull? Oh, I really should be using a highlighter here and not a pen. Apologies. Dull, roar. This is an oxymoron. If something's dull, a dull sound, then it can't really be a roar at the same time. That's our first oxymoron. We'll keep reading. Is this really progress or the final push that will bring the jaguar to the brink of extinction? New roads and houses are a bitter sweet. Here's one. Think about that taste. If something is bitter, it is sour. If something is sweet, it is sweet. Can't really be both. This is an oxymoron, two words side by side contradicting, so bittersweet is our second example that we've managed to find. Did you spot this one too? Let's keep going. New roads and houses are a bittersweet consolation for the destruction of this creature's habitat. This is no peaceful conquest. Now this seems to me a contradiction. Peaceful. And if something is peaceful, can't really be a conquest too, because conquest suggests some kind of violence. So here is our third oxymoron. Peaceful conquest. Really like that one. Can't spell it, but I like how it sounds. The loud whisper of machines bring devastation in their wake. I think I've missed one here. If it's loud, can't really be a whisper too, can it? So there's our next oxymoron at work. This advert has loads. Loud whisper. Right. See if there's one more here. Loud whisper of machines bring devastation in their wake. Now is the time to act. It is our only choice. This one was on our guide page. Did you spot that? If it's the only one, then there can't be a choice. A choice suggests you've got many options, not just one. That's our final oxymoron in advert. Only choice. Did you spot them? Now that we've learnt about this new device, oxymorons, which writers use, we're going to add it to our toolkit, our checklist if you like. So let's have a recap now and share our checklist of features and techniques that we've learnt about over the last 2 weeks in English, both this week when we've been looking at persuasive adverts and the week before half term when you were working with Mrs. Thornley on poetic devices. Just a recap to make sure that we fully understand them. So I have a checklist here and this is on the Google Drive for you. Let's talk through. For poetry, and adverts use this too, there's this idea of repetition, anaphora, repetition of some words and phrases, or assonance, the repetition of some vowel sounds. Now we've seen repetition used in adverts this week in the very first advert that we looked at, the rangtang advert. There's a rangtang in my bedroom, there's a rangtang in my bedroom. That kept on being repeated the whole way through the advert to really drive the message home. So that's what that is at work. Now figurative language you already know really well. I know you worked on this really hard in your poetry learning, but advertisers use this too, using simile or metaphor. So just to remind you, I had a look back at your poetry work and there was this term in one of the poems which I really liked, like guardians. The trees in the rainforest were described as being like guardians. That's a simile. And then metaphor, the forest is a mother. Mother Nature, perhaps. Alliteration, where you use that same sound at the start of words. I know you know this well. Swear it on the stars. That was used in that first advert that we looked at this week, the Rangtang advert. That had alliteration in it quite a lot. Personification, where you give something that isn't real human characteristics. Now the adverts are going to do this to make us really sympathise with the animals, make us sympathise with the rainforest destruction. I found one in one of the poems that you worked on. The personification was the forest yawns, because a forest can't really yawn. That's a human characteristic. Works really well. So I popped that in there to remind you what personification is, because it might well be a technique that you could use this week when creating your own advert. Emotive language to create pathos. Powerful adjectives, powerful verbs, powerful adverbs to describe. There's been so many of these that we've read through. I've just picked out a couple to remind you. From our second advert this week, stinging wounds, tightly binding chains was in the circus advert. I thought, excellent emotive language, really created pathos. Now here's our new one, juxtaposition to contrast two opposite concepts. Do you remember in the circus advert, it tried to really jar us and make us think, the circus isn't all about fun. It used the language of fun jarred right next to the language of the misery of the circus. A fantastic effect that we could try and use this week when we're writing our own advert. And then our new one from today, oxymoron. I've put loud whisper, bittersweet in here. I think I might put a space in between those two words. And then onomatopoeia, excuse me, I always struggle to say that word, onomatopoeia. The words that sound like the sound. Crack of the whip was used in the second advert that we looked at this week, and that crack is the onomatopoeic word. So there we are. There's our checklist recap to remind us of all the different techniques that we have as a writer in our toolkit now. And our job for the rest of this week, for today and tomorrow, is to try and grab all of these features together to create the most powerful, emotive advert that we can to persuade our reader. Now, if you have the checklist in front of you that you've printed from the Google Drive, you might want to just take a few moments to add an example to each section to make sure that you understand and remember each one. If you haven't printed the checklist out, perhaps you could just write on notepaper, R for repetition, F for figurative language, A for alliteration, and just make yourself a little bullet point note, because you don't really need to have this printed out to be able to do that. The important thing is that you have a checklist there so that you can go back through it and tick things off as you include them. So you might want to pause the video for a moment here to get your checklist and just remind yourself to make sure that you have it firmly in front of you before we move on. And now if you're ready, the next thing we're going to do today is use our checklist of devices to analyse a new advert and think about how have the advertisers employed all of the techniques that we know about to achieve their overall aim, which is to create pathos and persuade us that this issue is important enough to get our attention. Now on the drive, you will find the picture and the accompanying text of this advert. The campaign was run by the WWF and it was called Extinction Can't Be Fixed. Just like the LPDA campaign that we looked at earlier in the week, this campaign used 3 different, very emotive pictures, but the text used to support them all was exactly the same. The image used on each of the adverts shows an animal which is in serious danger of extinction. In a very contrasting environment that you wouldn't normally see it in, they all seem to be in a mechanic's workshop being looked at by somebody who's trying to fix them. Now let's take a look at the advert in more depth, and I will read the text to you as we watch. Can you imagine a world without the sheer beauty of a wild tiger, or the prowling, purring, pure elegance of a panther? With every brutal swing of the axe and ugly rumble of the bulldozer, The Amazon rainforest is fast disappearing. Every 60 seconds another acre is felled. In the deafening silence, the rainforest mourns the death of yet another species. Gone forever, to return never. Our planet deserves better. Our children deserve a better future. In a world where everything can be easily man-made, manufactured and man-handled, just take a moment to remember, extinction can't be fixed. It's a powerful advert. Now it's time to analyse and look a little deeper at the text, which you'll find on the Google Drive with the tiger image above it. So what you're going to do is take the checklist and annotate or highlight if you've printed out the page. If not, then you're going to make a short note of the checklist on your page, like I mentioned before, just R for repetition, A for alliteration, and you can add a short example of what you saw in the advert next to it. So let's take a look now. First, let's look for how repetition was used to really drive the points home. Where can you spot repetition? Highlight that now. I can see it's used here. Our planet deserves better. Our children deserve a better future. It's time for you to pause the video, read back through the text in detail, and see which of these devices you can spot at work, and then we'll come back together and compare in a few moments' time to see which from the checklist we can see. Okay, pause the video here while you do that. Right, now we're back together. Let's see if we agree on what you spotted. Now, I just started already here while I was waiting. I spotted alliteration in the second sentence, the prowling, purring, pure elegance of a panther. Next, the personification. The personification was created by saying the rainforest mourns the death of yet another species, because mourning is something that human beings would do, not forests. So the personification is created to make us feel that the rainforest is a living, breathing thing. Emotive language, there was so much emotive language here. The sheer beauty of the wild tiger, the brutal swing of the axe, the ugly rumble of the bulldozer. I'm sure there are more. What did you spot? Now, I'm going to my purple highlighter next for the oxymorons. There was a really good example here, the deafening silence. There was the oxymoron at work. I've also spotted onomatopoeia. Rumble is an onomatopoeic word because it really has the sound that it creates. The rumble of the bulldozer. Purring does the same actually. So I might highlight that too. Aha, I've spotted more alliteration. Manufactured, man-handled, man-made, moment. That repetition of the same sound at the start of a word, alliteration. And I think actually this advert uses more devices than we've even looked at this week. I wonder if you've spotted and discussed. Gone forever, to return never. We've got rhyme at work here, as well as those punchy short sentences that we've worked on before when we were doing our narrative writing. Do you remember? I think that's quite effective. I might try to steal that and use that in my advert this week. Something that's not on our checklist, but is at work here too, is rhetorical questions. I'm going to pop that down here in my checklist, because here, what colour can I use for this? Let's go for a green. Well, I'm supposed to have used that for... I'll have to use grey. Sorry about the boring highlighting colour. Grey will have to do for rhetorical questions. Can you imagine a world without the sheer beauty of a wild tiger? A rhetorical question to start the advert is really effective. Now, the juxtaposition, I think, was created here by starting us off with this idea of the beauty, the wild tiger. I'm going to just highlight all around this first sentence. This is all a really, really good image, but right next to it, every brutal swing of the axe and ugly rumble of the bulldozer, the Amazon rainforest is fast disappearing. It's a very jarring, contrasting concept from beauty to brutal in the first 2-3 sentences. That's the juxtaposition. Now, I haven't spotted any simile and metaphor, but I did spot rhyme, so I'm going to add that into figurative language there, just because I've got space for it. It doesn't mean, though, that we can't use simile and metaphor in our own writing. It just hasn't appeared in this particular one. Did you find those examples? Here we can see how an advertiser has used nearly every single one of the devices that we've learnt about to create pathos and persuade the reader and viewer of their message, which in this case is that once an animal becomes extinct, there is nothing we can do to fix it, so we need to prevent that from happening while we can. All of the adverts seem to have a very powerful strapline at the end: extinction can't be fixed. Or animal circuses, don't be part of the show. So I'm going to try to use that in my advert as well. Now, with this advert in mind, and all of the techniques that we've learnt about, that we've now got in our writer's toolkits, in other words, our brains, it's time to start planning our own adverts for our final task this week. On the Google Drive, you will find lots of different pictures which are trying to convey an environmental message, but none of these adverts have words. They may just have a strapline attached to them. That's where we come in. We're going to choose the one that we identify with the most, and then write our own text to add weight to that image to finish the advert. So let's take a look through the choices we've set out for you to pick from this week. And as we look at each image, I want you to think about what the message is that they're trying to convey. This will help you decide if it's the one for you or not. So let's start. This is the first image that we have on the Google Drive for you. Just have a little look at that for a moment. Blue whale. But this blue whale seems to be completely covered in man-made graffiti. What do you think the message is here? Possibly that it's man that's destroying the seas, that we're not respecting creatures, we're not looking after our planet enough. Is this an image that you think you could identify with? There's 12 in all, so don't make up your mind quite yet. I'm going to move on. Now, this next one has a tagline here. Rubbish can be recycled, nature cannot. And we have a reindeer here that seems to be completely made up of things that people have thrown away, and rather than being on a grassy hill where it should be, it's just on a rubbish dump. Do you identify with this message? I think it's to do with us throwing away too many things, not respecting the things that we have and creating too much litter. Let's move on and see if you like the next one. I've got a sea turtle. And the option that you would get on a computer when you're thinking about saving a file. Save or don't save. No tagline for this one. Completely up to you. What do you think the message is? On to our next one. There's a little tagline down here. Every like saves lives. It's a WWF advert. And we have the like, thumbs up sign, made of ice. And on that tiny point, a very, very small polar bear mother and polar bear cub. What do you think the message that it's trying to convey is here? No tagline at all. All we have is an ice cream cone. But on the top of the ice cream cone seems to be our planet. And that planet is melting. Could the message here be about climate change? Do you identify with this advert the most? Take a moment to think about each one. Really powerful image here, a jaguar, but as it's jumping, it seems to be crumbling into dust. What do you think the message of this advert is? Is it something to do with extinction of endangered species? Beautiful image. The show mustn't go on. It's a great tagline. And the tiger is attached to strings like a puppet. Do you think this is a similar message to the animal circuses advert that we looked at earlier in the week? That animals are being used for our entertainment as performers. Is this the image that you perhaps identify with the most for your advert writing this week? Don't make up your mind yet. We'll move on and have a look. Now, both of these images come from exactly the same campaign, but I thought you might like to see both. The tagline is "Your waste, fatal." So on the top of the surface of the sea, we've got a can, but underneath the water, it looks like a grenade. The plastic bottle thrown away, floating in the ocean. Underneath the surface, the part that we can't see, looks like a torpedo. What do you think the message is here? Would you care more if I was a panda? It looks like a fish, but I've got a mask on. Would you care more if I was a panda? What's the environmental message here? Possibly that human beings don't care about polluting the seas because fish aren't cute and cuddly. But we should. Would you care more if I was a panda? Let's move on and have a look at the next. And what can we see here? It looks like the rainforest. And what shape are the trees in? Could it be a pair of lungs? Could the message here be saying that deforestation is causing us to hack away and spoil part of the planet, and this is what lets our planet breathe? The trees are the things that create the oxygen. It's a really strong image. No text and no tagline at all. It would be completely up to you to make up your own here. I love that one. Next, mother polar bear, cub, but not in their normal environment, just in a cardboard box by the side of a street. Global warming is leaving many homeless. Is this trying to get us to think that if we spoil the habitat for these creatures, they'll have nowhere to live? Is this what we really want? And then our final image for you to choose from here. Got a cub and a jaguar, but they seem to have little labels hanging off them, like clothes would. S for small, perhaps, and XL for extra large. And the tagline is, "Fashion claims more victims than you think." What's the environmental message here? Could this advert be about the fur trade? About how we shouldn't be using animal fur for fashion? Take a moment to look back through the images now, look through them on the Google Drive, and see which one you identify with the most, because that's the one that you're going to plan your own advert writing for this week. Which one did you feel the most strongly about? So you're going to pause the video here while you do that, look through the images again, select the picture that you will want to use. Great. So now you've chosen your picture that you will write the text for tomorrow, today we have some time to plan. Firstly, you need to make sure that you're really clear on the message of your advert. This is the one that I've chosen to show you. I'm going to go with the against the fur fashion industry. So, fashion claims more victims than you think. This one already has the tagline. It is really clear that the message needs to be anti-fur. A very strong advert that persuades the reader not to buy or wear real fur. That's what I'm going to be concentrating on this week. Make sure you've got the message for your advert and the picture of your advert somewhere where you can clearly see it as you plan. Now I'm ready to start planning, and there's two ways that you can do this. You can either get your copy of the checklist and fill it in with examples of the different features that come to mind in this side, or you might prefer to mind map around the image and use the checklist as a tick sheet. It's up to you entirely. What I'm choosing to do is write my ideas around the image, because I think that will help me be more creative and keep the message in my mind as I plan. So that's what I'm going to do today. But I'm going to be cross-referencing with the devices sheet here and thinking back to the other adverts we've read this week. I'm going to keep looking across and see if I can create a mashup of these different ideas to make my new advert. So when you've got yours ready, let's take a look at how we can plan. So I'm going to put mine in the centre here, and I'm just going to put my ideas around it. Now I've already prepared mine, and I'm just going to do it as a bit of a tick sheet down the side so that you can see, because I'm cross-referencing all the time. So for repetition, I thought I would go with if we buy fur, whereas if we don't. So I'm going to use those same two sentence openers there for my repetition. I don't think I'm going to have a metaphor, but I am going to use a simile in my advert. I'm going to use this one. The solution is as simple as reading SMLXL. So in other words, the solution is as simple as reading small, medium, large and extra large. This is a bit of a play on words, because usually you would say it's as simple as ABC. But in my case, because this is to do with the clothing industry, I'm going for this for my simile. Alliteration, I'm going to have senseless slaughter. I'm also going to have supermodels strut their stuff. So I'm just going to place these ideas around my image as I'm planning. For personification, I'm going to talk about Mother Nature, and I'm going to borrow the idea that we've read a couple of times before, the rainforest mourns. In motive language, I'm going to describe these creatures as being defenceless, and I'm probably going to think of a few more examples along the way of emotive language when I really get writing, but this is my example to show you. Now I'm going to borrow that juxtaposition idea ever so slightly from the circus advert, because I'm going to begin my advert with "Welcome ladies and gentlemen to the fashion show of the century." That's going to be my opening line, but instead of talking about circuses, because this is all to do with catwalks, it's a very different catwalk here than the sort you'd get in a fashion show. I might try to use that as a bit of a play on words, catwalk. This is a fashion show. My oxymoron I'm going to nab from the other advert is going to be, it is the only choice. Now I don't think I'm going to use onomatopoeia in my writing, but I am going to use a rhetorical question, and this is the one that I've come up with. It's very similar to the advert that we've read today. In a world where almost everything has a monetary value placed upon it, isn't it time to see the real worth? And I can see I'm going to need a comma in there, so I'm going to add it now. And those are my first few planning ideas, all around the image that I've chosen to write about, which I'm going to do the writing for tomorrow. So that is it from me today. It's now over to you. It's your time to use the checklist, use the image, and just start to plan all of the different language, the techniques that you're going to use, the phrases that come to mind, which are going to lead you perhaps to your tagline if you've already had one. I've got fashion claims more victims than you think, so I'm going to make sure that I include that as well on my plan. So take some time now to plan everything that you want your advert to say, the first ideas that come to mind, and tomorrow when we come back together, we're going to do the writing part to add the meat and add the weight to our adverts. Well done for your work today, Year 6. You're doing fantastically on this unit, and I will see you tomorrow.